Hey guys, Will here. So we're kicking off a brand new video series here at Boosted Media, which I'm really excited about. Something we've been wanting to do for quite some time now and something that's been requested by you guys a lot recently as well. So as you can see behind me, we have a selection of more entry to mid-level sim racing gear. And we're going to be doing some comparisons both in terms of lap times and the impact they have on performance as well as immersion and just the overall experience and enjoyment of sim racing. So we're going to be using a Next Level Racing GT-Lite cockpit. We're going to be starting off with a Logitech G923 wheel, and then over the course of the next few months we'll be testing out a bunch of other gear to see how it impacts as you move up through the tiers in terms of costs. So we'll switch over to the other side. We've got a Thrustmaster TSXW racer wheel, and that comes as a kit with the wheel, the base, and of course some pretty entry-level pedals. We'll then be taking a look at the TLCM pedals from Thrustmaster as well, seeing whether they're a worthwhile upgrade. And as we've covered on the channel a few times in the past, pedals do tend to be, along with a solid cockpit or a solid mount, one of the most important things when it comes to consistency and speed. So we'll take a look at those. We'll then take a look at the TSPC Racer. That is a wheelbase and wheel combination. So there we'll have a look at whether it's more cost effective to get something like the TSXW and then later upgrade the pedals should you wish to do so, or whether you're better off starting off with something like the TSPC that doesn't come with pedals and starting off with, say, something like the TLCM pedals. We'll also include some handbrakes and shifters in the mix as well. So we've got the TH8A shifter from Thrustmaster as well as the TSS Handbrake Plus Sparko mod. We've got the Fanatec H pattern as well as the Fanatec handbrake. And then I'm hoping by the time we've made our way through all this gear, the new Fanatec CSL DD will be available and we'll be able to do some testing there as well to compare that experience against what we have here. So we might include the Club Sport Wheelbase 2.5 in the mix as well. I'm not quite sure yet exactly what Fanatec's plan is for this base, whether it's going to be superseded by the CSL DD with that boost kit that we've seen in their marketing recently. So whether or not this guy will be relevant by the time we get to that point, I'm not quite sure. But we'll start off over here with the more entry-level G923 on the GT-Lite cockpit. Then we'll work our way up from there, and hopefully by the end of this video series you'll have a much better understanding of where the sweet spot is in terms of where to get the best value for your particular budget. And I also want to say a big thank you to Pagnian Imports as well as Next Level Racing for providing the GT-Lite cockpit as well as the Thrustmaster gear, and of course Fanatec for providing their gear, and Logitech for providing the G923. So thank you very much to those guys for making this possible, but let's get started. Okay, so this is our starting point. We've got a Logitech G923 along with the driving force shifter and the Next Level Racing GT-Lite cockpit. So total value here in Australian dollars, and these are prices that we've taken directly off the pagnianimports.com.au website just for simplicity's sake. So 1,077 Australian dollars. That does include free shipping for the wheel and pedals, obviously as a package. The cockpit, the driving force shifter doesn't include free shipping from what we could see on the website, but I'd suggest getting in touch with them. If you're buying everything together, they might include that, but yeah, get in touch with them to sort that one out. But let's just quickly run through the pricing here. So the Logitech G923, which does come with the pedals as well, $599 including shipping. The GT-Lite cockpit, $379, and then the driving force shifter is 99 Australian dollars. Now, if you're the DIY type and you're able to build something out of, say, PVC piping or some sort of a wooden frame and able to pick up a seat cheaply as well, secondhand from a wrecker or something, then you could definitely get the cost down even further and get a similar experience. I think $379 for the cockpit is quite expensive. It does include free shipping as well, which, you know, this is quite a big box. It is quite heavy, so it kind of makes a little bit more sense when you consider that as well. But $379 is quite expensive, so if you are able to DIY something, as I said, you could definitely get the cost price down. But when you consider that something like the Fanatec Podium Porsche 911 GT3R wheel, you know, that alone is $1,000 by itself. So when you can get a complete sim rig, you know, completely delivered for around the same price as just a wheel, and you know, this isn't even considered a super high-end wheel either. There's wheels that are a lot more expensive than this. So we do kind of need to put it in perspective and consider that we are getting a complete sim racing experience here, minus the screen and the PC, of course, for, you know, just over 1,000 Australian dollars, which is pretty good. So coming a little bit closer now, we'll run you through a few details on the cockpit before we get into driving. So you may remember probably about a year ago now, we reviewed the FGT Lite, which is similar to this, but has the option of adjustment down here as well, or the addition of adjustment, I should say, so that you can actually lower the seat pretty much all the way down to the ground and get into a Formula style seating position as well. Now, we reviewed that about 18 months ago, something like that. Now, we had quite a few problems when I put that cockpit together. I actually didn't realize that this whole part up here, the wheel deck, swiveled, and I had to do a follow-up video to correct that simply because we had so much trouble actually getting this part into the receptacle here. We had to sort of file it out and get it all working. So I'm happy to report that in the time since when we did the GT-Lite review and now, we didn't really have any problems at all with constructing this. We did have to just drill out the holes in the top little parts here. There were a few little metal burrs that were just left over in the construction that we had to drill out. And you might have noticed that in the footage when we were putting it together, but everything else lined up pretty well. Didn't have any other major problems at all. So I'm glad to see that they have addressed those little issues that we had in the past. But look, in terms of adjustability, they have included a lot of stuff here. I think if you're particularly tall, maybe over 6 foot, you may have a few problems getting into a super comfortable position. But you can see here with our pedals, which are pretty much universally mountable. If I lift it up like this, you can see we've just got channels underneath here so we can screw onto whatever pedals we have. But we've got these little sort of quick release levers here that we can spin. So we can unscrew those. And that allows us to slide the pedal deck up and down like so. So we're going to go maximum height for now because I'm guessing that's probably where I'm going to need it. And then we can just tighten those down again. Like so. We can also, you'll see there's a little push pin here or a little release clip that we can push in, and that allows us to flip this bar upside down as well. So if we want the pedals to lay completely flat on the ground, we can put it in that configuration as well. Of course, we do have the advantage that this is entirely foldable as well, so we can fold this up, the wheel deck can fold down, but I don't think we really need to do another review of the entire thing like that. If you want to see how that works, check out the GT-Lite. I'll put a link in the description below for you to that review, and you can see how it all folds together. But if we flip around the other way here, as I mentioned before, the wheel deck does swivel, so we can release this little clip here and fold this part out, and that allows us to get in and out of the rig nice and easily. So we just step in and then fold the rig back around, put the clip around like so, and we're good to start driving. So it's a pretty clever design. We've also got this reinforcement strap here as well. So what we do is once we're in the rig and we're all in a good seating position, we just pull down on the strap, get it nice and tight. And what that does is it stops, or minimizes, I should say, because there still is a little bit of flex there, but it minimizes the amount of flex that we have in the wheel deck here as well. Now, in terms of adjustability for height and wheel position, we've got this quite clever cam system down here. So let's just zoom in and have a look at this quickly too. So what we do is we release that off, and you can see basically we've got these little lobes on the cam here that can move into different positions. So you can imagine we can adjust the shifter. We can also, if we release both sides, adjust this piece as well, so we can pitch it up or down. So obviously if we go further forward, that's going to lower the height of the seat and kind of pitch it down a little bit. If we go the opposite way, it's going to bring it more upright. So we can tighten that back up. So basically all we do is just screw it up and then pinch it back into position. I'm just going to need to adjust this slightly here first. There we go. That should slide back in now, like so. So I do need to do a little bit of adjustment. Once we get it down on the ground, we'll get it all adjusted properly and talk about ergonomics and comfort and everything. We also do have some height adjustment here too. So you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 holes that we can adjust through a range of about probably 20 centimeters, 15, 20 centimeters there, I think. And yeah, there's not a whole lot of support in the backrest. We do have these kind of side pads here to sort of keep you centered on the seat so you don't slide around too much. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of lumbar support or anything like that. So again, when I reviewed the GT-Lite, I didn't have too many problems with comfort, but it is going to depend on body type, of course. And that's pretty much it. We've got adjustment here as well for the pitch of the wheel. So all we need to do is just loosen here, and you can see you've got kind of like a sprocket system there that you can tighten up, and that goes in position. And all the accessories do bolt on as well, so you're not relying on clips anywhere. You can see we actually removed the center clamp for our driving force and screwed in through here. We've got 2 bolts that go straight through into the I think it was M6 threads on that. M6 threads on this as well inside the wheelbase, so that just screws through. Didn't have any problems with alignment. And as you saw before, we do have the M6 screws to fix our pedals in position too. Okay, so the rig is all set up now and ready to go. So what I wanted to do first of all is just sort of run you through a bit of the philosophy behind exactly how we're going to be approaching this. So we're running a Assetto Corsa here. We're running a Porsche 962 around Nordschleife. Now the reason why we're using Assetto Corsa, despite it not being a sim that I drive all that often, well actually one of the reasons why I've chosen it is because I'm not all that familiar with the sim, and it's not going to sort of be, I don't have I don't have significant muscle memory established in my normal daily driver rig, which we'll have a look at in just a moment. But I wanted to use Assetto Corsa as well because iRacing, Automobilista 2, most of the other sims all have regular updates to their tire models, their physics engines and so forth. And that's obviously gonna mess with the times that we set throughout the course of this video series as we're testing out different gear. So I wanted to have something that was as consistent as possible. We're using the Porsche 962 because we have a real world baseline from Stefan Beloff's hot lap as well, where he did a 6:11, was it, Tom? Yep. 6:11, yep. And Tom actually beat that time in Assetto Corsa. There's a video of him on the channel, so we'll link that down below for you guys as well. But we also have Jimmy Broadbent's time as well. He was able to beat that time after, I think it was about 3 years of trying as well. So it is a difficult thing to do. And the reason, the other reason why I like Nordschleife for this kind of testing is because you're relying on a lot more than just muscle memory. It's very easy on a shorter track to just, drive around like a robot, remembering visual cues and not really relying on tactile feedback at all. Whereas with a track like this, you really do need to feel what's going on with the car, how it moves, how it transitions over bumps, and that's really going to affect over the course of a long lap like what we have here. And the other reason why we chose this car in particular is because it is an old school car, high power rear wheel drive, doesn't have all the modern assists to kind of keep you in line. So we thought that would be a good combination to test out here. So before we get started on this rig, what I wanted to do is just sort of quickly run you through the daily driver rig that I'm used to. This is what I'm coming from. Now, the total value of this rig in Australian dollars is probably actually a little bit over $100,000 now. So 100 times more expensive than what we have here if you take out the PC and the monitor, obviously. So this is what I'm used to driving every day. And the reason why I'm showing you this is because, I wanted to sort of let you guys know this is kind of my reference point in my mind. This is what I'm used to. We've got a SimiCube 2 Ultimate direct drive base, very powerful base. We've got hydraulic pedals down there as well, SimTag pedals, with hydraulic cylinders in them, very realistic feeling. We've got a motion platform down here as well, which not only moves the seat around, but also moves the car from side to side. So we've got pitch, roll, and sway. And that allows us to get a pretty realistic representation of when the car's moving around underneath us as well. It gives you that really nice sort of seat of pants movement. So that's the level of feedback. And obviously with the 65-inch wraparound screens as well, it gives you a real, a huge amount of depth and a real sense of what's going on around you, much more so than what you would get with a smaller 27-inch screen like what we have here. So obviously a lot of the things that you're seeing here aren't directly relevant to, driving quickly and consistency. So we've got button boxes, we've got gauges, we've got wind simulation, we've got all kinds of gear on here that isn't going to make you faster. But I think if you were to boil down, just the things that are directly relevant to comparison here, so the wheelbase, the pedals, and the motion, I guess, would be the main things, and the solidity of the rig as well. You're probably looking at $20,000, maybe $30,000 worth of equipment there. So let's say, the gear that's relevant directly to what we're testing here is about 30 times more valuable than what we're testing over on this side. Not showing you this to flex by any means, just wanted to give you an idea of, what I'm used to, so you'll understand more the experience when I jump into this as a reference point. So what we'll do now is we'll jump into this rig and I'll take you through the initial impressions of driving experience and my observations, and then we'll set some lap times. All right, so look, I'll be completely honest with you guys. When I first jumped in and went for a drive, I really, really struggled with it. And I'll kind of give you an example. You can see the back end of the car moving around a little bit here as I'm kind of accelerating. You can see there, I managed to catch it just, but that was actually a really good example. I'm glad that happened because I was able to catch that slide. And that's kind of the point that I want to make here, because when I first jumped in, and what you're seeing now is after probably about, I'd say, 3 hours of tweaking settings and adjusting and just sort of practicing and getting familiarized with the type of feedback that I'm getting here. Now, my immediate reaction was, okay, yeah, this feels kind of crappy compared to what I'm used to. And obviously you would expect that coming from such an expensive setup, as I just showed you. But the thing I realized is that once I actually kind of stopped trying to replicate what I'm used to, so I stopped trying to make the wheel so responsive, I stopped trying to sort of extract more strength and more fidelity out of the feedback and just kind of embraced it for what it is, I actually found that my brain started to adapt. And again, we're only talking about force feedback here. We'll talk about pedals in just a moment. But once I kind of accepted it for what it is and started to allow my brain to adjust to that, what I discovered is that I actually gained speed pretty quickly. Now, I'm still not as fast on this as I am on the other system. And I want to do a little bit more practice before we set some lap times and some baselines. But I think what it comes down to is that on a high-end direct drive wheelbase, you really do feel all the movements of the car, obviously dependent on the sim and dependent on the settings and adjustments and everything. You at least have the ability to sort of feel all the movements of the car. If the car sort of snap oversteers or understeers, you feel that rotation in the wheel. And you'll often see when people post videos of their reaction to driving with a direct drive wheelbase for the first time, you know, they're overwhelmed and they say, you know, the car seems to be driving itself. The car catches itself when it starts sliding. And that is true, but the difference is here, I can still catch slides just fine once I get used to it, but I'm relying on what I'm seeing on the screen rather than what I'm feeling through the wheel. So the point is, all of the information that's necessary to drive quickly is still there. It may impact consistency a little bit because obviously if you're not feeling it, you're not able to react quite so quickly. But I think the reason why you do get these people in professional esports that are, you know, absolutely insanely fast on very entry-level equipment is simply down to the fact that all that information is there. You can see on the screen if the car begins to slide and starts to step sideways. It's just a matter of training your brain to rely on the correct information that's available to you to react. So I think for me, that's the reason why, even though people always, when they upgrade to a direct drive wheel, always say, oh, it's amazing, I don't know how I ever drove on a lower end wheel. The flip side to that is that you are always going to have these people that are insanely fast on entry level gear, and I think that's the reason why. So I'm just going to try and pick up a little bit of speed here and sort of just give you a few more examples with the car moving around a little bit. So you can see there, back end of the car stepped out, and yeah, I mean, I've lost it now, but I really wasn't feeling much through the wheel then at all. Like, I mean, I could feel that the car was starting to rotate. I could feel the wheel starting to step sideways, but I didn't get that sensation of the car sort of, you know, beginning to slide. I didn't get the sense that it was really moving until it was too late and it was, you know, already properly sliding. But what I did notice was the relationship of the cabin of the car to the road. I could see the car moving and I could react to what I was seeing on the screen perfectly fine. So once I've kind of adjusted my mind to rely on that information rather than what I'm feeling through the wheel, I'm able to go, you know, relatively quick. And it is going to take more practice to adjust, but I think that that's what's making the difference here. So that's the experience with the force feedback out of the box. All right, so let's talk about pedals now. You guys have heard me say many times on the channel now that pedals and a solid cockpit, and we'll talk about this cockpit in just a moment as well, are the two most important things when it comes to prioritizing your spend on a sim rig. Now, I think there's a very good reason for that, and we kind of touched on it. We kind of hinted at it before when we were talking about force feedback. So I said before, you can kind of supplement the lack of feeling or anything that's missing in force feedback with visual references. So you can see the car moving around and you can kind of adjust your mindset. You can train your brain, so to speak, to react to what's going on the screen and replace that information that's missing through the steering wheel. And that's the reason why people are still able to go really fast with a pretty basic steering wheel. But when it comes to pedals, we don't have so much of a reference point. You really can't see on the screen beyond your braking reference markers or anything like that that you're using to pick your braking spot. You don't have any visual reference for whether you're braking too deep or how you really sort of need to modulate your brakes throughout the turn. So you really have to rely on muscle memory and feel in the brake pedal to optimize your braking. So when it comes to a brake pedal, there's one which I think, and this is just my opinion, but there's one thing that I think is fundamentally important, and that is having some sort of a threshold point in the brake pedal where you can kind of hit that pressure point consistently every single time. Now, obviously, we have load cell brakes, we have potentiometer brakes like what this one is, and we have, you know, hydraulic brakes, we have Hall effect sensor brakes. We've got all kinds of different types of brakes. Fundamentally, they're all trying to achieve the same thing, but the difference with potentiometer brakes, like what we have on more entry-level pedals, is they're actually using the physical position of the pedal to relay brake pressure into the sim, whereas more expensive brakes like load cell brakes and hydraulic brakes are using pressure sensors or load cells to actually translate physical pressure into the sim. So that's a much more even match for how it works in the real world, and that's why people often will say that, you know, load cell brakes and pressure based brakes are a lot better and a lot more accurate. So let's get underway here quickly now, and let's just talk about how I like to adjust my brake pedals. So one of the things that I have been quite impressed with and talked about when we did our review of the Logitech G923 is they have improved the feel of the brake pedal quite significantly over the baseline models previously. Now there are load cell upgrades available for these pedals, as well as different springs and all kinds of things that you can do to improve things even further. But what I'm actually really liking about the G923 brakes specifically is they do have quite a nice defined pressure point at about the sort of 80% pressure point. So you can see here, as I'm braking, I'm pushing down to about 80% there. Now, what I can do is I can actually modulate my brake around that. So every time I push my foot down, I can feel that pressure point. I can feel that point where the pressure sort of transitions from being softer to harder. And that gives me a nice reference point that I can set my muscle memory from. So I'm always able to brake to that same point. And I can calibrate that in the game to be my maximum braking pressure before locking up. And then I can modulate around that. So you'll see as I drive, and I'll do some more driving now, as I brake into the next turn, and we're actually coming up to the carousel, so it's a good point to actually show you this. So we'll come up, and now I'm braking to 80%, and I'm just braking a little bit more heavily. You can see there I lost it a little bit there, so I had to sort of modulate around what I was doing. And I'll give you a couple more examples as I kind of go around here. This car is very low, so it's difficult around the carousel, but we'll do it again up through here. So I'm braking to 80%, lifting off. And you can see how I'm sort of just modulating my inputs. I'm not just slamming the brake to 100% every single time. And because I can feel that pressure point, I'm not having issues with locking up, and I'm able to sort of modulate my braking inputs quite well. So even though it isn't a load cell, again, because I do have that physical reference, I can feel that transition in pressure. I am actually able to modulate my braking quite well. So again, I think I could learn to be very, very fast with these pedals, or at least, you know, close to as fast as I am with my load cell pedals. The difference is that there isn't quite so much feeling there, and that's really where I think it comes down to the difference between, you know, super expensive pedals and cheaper pedals. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see, you know, how the upgrade, whoops, as I spin around, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how upgrading these pedals is going to affect my lap times. I think that I could adjust to using these pedals and be quite fast, but I don't think that the consistency would quite be there, simply because although we do have that pressure point there, it isn't as defined as we have with more expensive pedals, and there isn't so much feeling around that either. So I can push to that point, but then I don't have a lot of feeling beyond that point or before that point. So it's a little bit difficult to kind of feel exactly what's going on. So hopefully that gives you a good understanding of what I'm feeling in terms of braking here. So let's talk about the cockpit a little bit as well. Now, what I can tell you is I'm not actually feeling a whole lot of movement or flex in the cockpit. Now, I don't know what you guys are seeing on camera. I haven't really paid attention to it myself, and I'm sure if I do pay attention to it, I'll see all sorts of things going on. But what I can say is that this particular cockpit, the lack of back support isn't actually a problem for me. Now, admittedly, I've never really had a problem with any setup that I've used in terms of back support, and I know there's a lot of people out there, like my wife, when she drives my main rig, she has all sorts of back problems. She has to use lumbar support cushions, whereas I don't have a problem with it at all. So maybe I'm just lucky in that regard. But, you know, there's not a whole lot of support there, but I'm not feeling any flex in the backrest. I mean, there is a little, like when I pay attention to it, there's definitely some flex there if I bounce it around. But I think, you know, when I'm just driving, I'm not really getting a whole lot of sense of movement. There's no sort of side to side movement that's significant either. We haven't talked about the shifter yet either, but that's pretty solid too. And I mean, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about it now, because we have done that full review of the GT-Lite previously and talked about these things in great detail. But what I'll say for now is that I feel like this is every bit solid enough to extract the performance that you need out of a setup like this. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it holds up as we start to put more powerful bases on it as we get through the video series. But for now, I think it ticks all the boxes in terms of what you need for a setup like this one. So on to our timed laps now, and after battling for a while to put in a clean lap at all without spinning, I felt like I'd peaked for the day with a 650.093. And while that's not a particularly competitive lap time by any means, it's what I was able to achieve comfortably in a way that wasn't taking big risks. So I jumped straight back into the main rig after setting that time, and taking a similar approach, driving well within the limits, I was able to set a time of 6:43.4. Okay, so about 7 seconds difference between the daily driver rig being faster than this rig, but I think honestly that boils down to just familiarity, and as we were saying before, kind of depending on the cues that I'm used to with my muscle memory from my daily driver rig compared to this one. So I certainly wouldn't say that that's a scientific comparison between the two, and obviously those lap times aren't really competitive either. They're about 30 seconds off where they really need to be before it becomes a real comparison. But the point I was trying to prove there is more just the dependency on different types of feedback and the way your brain adjusts to it. And remember, when I first jumped in this rig, I was, not even able to go around a corner without spinning. And once I kind of got my brain around, using what I was seeing on the screen rather than what I was feeling through the wheel to really kind of, sense the little subtle nuances in the car's characteristics and movement, I was able to kind of wrap my head around that and go faster. So I think, if I was to put more time and more time and more time into it, I would get those lap times down. And I really don't think that there would be a massive difference in terms of all-out pace between the two rigs. I think really what it's going to come down to is just consistency and braking rather than the overall force feedback feeling, because I think everything else that I need in terms of, feeling what's going on with the car, I can kind of sense visually rather than through the force feedback anyway. And as we said before, I think that's the reason why, you have esports guys that are winning competitions constantly on pretty entry-level gear. And I'm obviously still wrapping my head around the physics in Assetto Corsa as well. It's not a sim that I've ever really used for anything other than just free roam for recording videos. So, once I get familiar with that, that's going to change things a lot as well. So what we'll do is we'll put these lap times up on a page on our website as well, which I'll link down in the description for you. And as we improve, I'll be coming back to older gear that we've tested and updating those lap times as well. So I think once we've been through all the gear, we'll come back through everything again and test those lap times again, and that'll give us a more accurate comparison in terms of raw pace. But really the point here is to, I guess, drive home to you guys that you don't need a super expensive rig to go fast and be consistent. It's more just about that immersion, and obviously, driving in a setup like that is way more immersive than this is, but that certainly doesn't mean that you can't have a really great time in a rig like this as well. And as for the components that we have here, I think that definitely the first thing that I would be upgrading would be the pedals. It'll be interesting to see once we do upgrade the pedals whether the rig holds up. It could be that we end up having a bit too much flex once we upgrade to a load cell, so we'll definitely be testing that out in the next few videos as well. But as for the rig that we have set up here, I think it's all pretty well matched together. There is a little bit of flex in the wheel deck here. It wasn't really noticeable when I was driving, and I think that overall, if this is the kind of setup that is going to fit in your budget, then you're absolutely going to have a good time. You can absolutely be competitive as well, and yeah, there's absolutely no reason to think that you need to spend more than this to be able to race with your mates and have a fantastic time and be competitive in competitions as well. So we haven't talked about shifters yet. I want to save that for a little bit later on, because I think that's going to boil down to the ecosystem that you find yourself in for your wheels and pedals largely, so I think we'll cover that in a separate video. But in terms of the overall immersion here, obviously the Logitech G923 can be a little bit grainy. It does lack a little bit of fidelity, and it does have quite a lot of clunky sort of feeling to it. So it'll be really interesting to upgrade to the Thrustmaster TSXW now in the next video, as well as the pedals that come with that, and see whether that's able to give us a more immersive experience and maybe even bring those lap times down and increase our consistency as well. We'll see. But that is for the next video. I hope you guys have found this one interesting and useful. If you have, please do leave a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel as well so you don't miss the future videos in the series. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.